If we stop the Russians in Ukraine, there won't be a World War III, and that I'm willing to put my life at risk for that cause. I'm an engineer for the International Legion 3rd Battalion drone team. Russian war machine, anything that it runs over, is just completely destroys. They bombed a children's cancer hospital. While this may not be America's fight right now, it will be if the Russians aren't stopped here. And I would encourage everyone from my home and all of America to learn from the lessons of history and understand that this is already our fight.
You're watching UATV English. We broadcast from the heart of Europe. It's brave hearts. So my today's guest, my big friend of Ukraine, my guest, brave heart, it's Boston from USA. Hello and welcome, Boston.
Hi. Thanks for having me, taking this time to speak with me.
Thanks you for what you're doing here in Ukraine, protecting Ukraine. And on the one hand, USA are so far from Ukraine, and from the other hand, USA is so close. USA now in Ukraine, protecting Ukrainian people. What does this war, Russian aggression, Russian-Ukrainian war, mean for you personally?
Well, to me, before I came here, one of the things that always would stress me out, that would worry me, that would keep me up at night, was how it seemed like for most of my life, the free world and democracies have kind of been losing ground to the autocracies and these oligarchic powers that seem to be on the rise. Like we saw it in Georgia, we saw it in Hong Kong, and even in Western countries, we see our democracy being eroded by authoritarians. And that kind of all changed in 2022. It seemed like at first Ukraine was going to fall in 3 days and that it would be another big step in the fall of democracy, but that didn't end up happening. Ukraine managed to hold on, and shortly after that, I had signed up with the International Legion, wanted to be a volunteer, wanted to do anything that I could to help turn the tide.
Why you decided to go here to be a volunteer, to be to protect Ukraine? Why? What this reason?
At least for me, inaction is a lot more stressful than actually going into even a dangerous situation. Because at least here, I know I'm doing something to help the world, doing something to correct an injustice that's been forced upon people who have already had too much expectations put upon them. Like, this fight should involve all democratic countries, really. It's all of our fight.
And what does this war mean for USA? Because, you know, Russian propaganda from time to time says that, oh, Europe is tired, oh, USA are tired because of this war, they don't care, etc., etc., etc. Russian propaganda. But you are from USA, you know truth. What is the attitude of Americans towards this aggression, Russian aggression?
Well, we also have a lot of Russian propaganda in the U.S. as well, and it's really caused a big divide among a lot of Americans. So back in my home country, there is a minority, but a sizable minority of people who believe that America should be isolationist, who believe in this fallacy that somehow America as it is today could somehow continue to exist while being completely insulated from the world. It's a fantasy that a concerning number of people seem to have latched on to. Part of the reason that I want to kind of come here is to, well, prove my words in that, like, I not only believe in the vision of the free world that was established ever since World War II, and that I'm willing to put my life at risk for that cause.
It's a huge risk, really. And what is your usual, ordinary life now in Ukraine? From day to day, what are you doing now?
Well, I'm an engineer for the International Legion 3rd Battalion drone team. So most of my time is spent, most of my time off the battlefield is spent configuring drones, repairing equipment that got broken on previous missions, and preparing munitions and weapons to use on the field. And then with drone teams in Ukraine, like the engineer does come along because it's inevitable when we're out on the field, something's going to break, and they will need me to fix it or find an alternative solution to keep us flying.
Did you have some kind of experience of engineering in USA?
Yeah, I mean, I've been an engineer all my life. Got my master's degree in it, and it's been all my previous jobs. Even worked as a military contractor for the Air Force for a while. So while I've never served before, I do have a lot of technical experience, and that was how I had hoped to be of help to the cause here in Ukraine.
If you didn't come to Ukraine, what would you do in USA?
I'd probably still be working on my job. Last job I was working in medical devices. I mean, again, it's certainly a safe, stable, and well-paying job. Definitely wasn't the smartest financial decision to come here, but again, to me, the cause is worthwhile. So I was all right putting all that behind, at least for a while, to do what I can to help Ukraine.
It's not about money, it's about idea, and it's about protection of peaceful nation. But from time to time, I ask my guests about protecting Ukraine, protecting Europe, protecting maybe democracy in the whole world, but globally protecting Ukraine here. What do you think? Do you do something useful, for example, for USA, for your country? And what kind of use you give?
I mean, it seems to me that there is a new set of access powers with Iran, China, and Russia all forming a very close alliance. The idea that people back in the U.S. can simply ignore this rising militaristic alliance, believe that it will never come to our shores, is a failure to learn one of the important lessons of history. So in a way, while this may not be America's fight right now, it will be if the Russians aren't stopped here. So even if it was a matter of self-interest, I do believe that it is in the interest of America, of Europe, and of all democratic countries in the world to ensure that Ukraine is successful in stopping the advance of these new access powers.
How can you describe Russian army, Russians, their behavior, what they do here in Ukraine?
I mean, it's going to depend a lot on your AO. Since I wasn't fighting in the early days of the war, at least where I've been fighting, it seems like most of the Russian soldiers we encounter are more what I would describe as mercenaries. They may be part of the conventional Russian army, but they're people who are just in it for the money. They're people who were offered this huge paycheck and signing bonus, and the Russian military leadership seems to have gotten very efficient at getting people to sign contracts with the promise of huge payment, and then very quickly sending them on suicide assaults, such that most of them will never receive a single paycheck, even if the monthly paycheck is supposedly quite high.
So for Russian, it's only about money. Oh, something else.
I'm sure it depends on which Russian you're talking about. They may still have a few fanatics who actually believe in the. I'm not even sure what their cause really is. Like they say they want to stop fascism and Nazism, and yet they have this fascist regime that they're loyal to. So I'm not quite sure what the ideology is, but at least all of the soldiers that we've encountered, both in Chasiv Yar and in our current AO, they mostly just seem to be either people who are here for the money, either lured in from a foreign country with the promise of a well-paying job, or people from poorer parts of Russia. So I think at least most of the soldiers that we're seeing now that it's later in the war, they are just here for the money.
Mm-hmm. What cities, villages you visited here in Ukraine, maybe regions, and where you were maybe, you remembered most of all these places, maybe people you remembered most of all, and which one?
Well, I started my training in the Lviv Oblast. And I have to say, I do think Lviv is the nicest city in Ukraine by far on account of it's been bombed the least. Some of the other regions that I've served in are Kharkiv and especially Druzhdivska. And in Druzhdyska particularly, like we were told like this was an area that was very sympathetic to Russia, but that was not the case with any of the people, any of the locals that I had a chance to speak to there. In fact, they were all very grateful for our presence. They were all, they would try to speak English when they could, and even if not, like they were very friendly and welcoming. And that did kind of surprise me because, again, supposedly, at least maybe this is just the Russian propaganda, but supposedly this is where Russia has the most support. But they all seem to be very sure in the cause, and they all seem to have a very good understanding of what would happen if the Russian army ever made it to that town. And that was a huge motivation for us to ensure that that never happens. Because when we were serving in that area, like I was watching as Chasiv Yar went from a beautiful city, a small city, but it was a beautiful place to now just a ruin. And the Russian war machine, anything that it runs over, is just completely destroys. And that will be the case for any other areas that the Russian war machine pushes into, which is why we do have a lot of motivation to ensure that doesn't happen, especially when we care about the people in the area we're fighting.
And this war machine, Russian war machine, it kills usually just peaceful people, not only military. They say, oh, this is not a NATO object. No, it's not NATO base. It's just school, for example, children garden, etc., medical center.
You know, I've occasionally browsed on some of the Russian Telegram channels just to see what they're talking about. And there's a phrase a lot of Russian mill bloggers use called potential military asset, is probably the way I translate it to English. But I guess from their perspective, they just see, oh, any building, any house, any school, that's a potential military asset. You know, there could be Ukrainian soldiers in there. You never know. So they just destroy everything.
And there are no just rules of war for them because they shoot a journalist, medicine, personnel.
Yeah, this is one thing that's always got me. Normally, when a country commits war crimes, it's considered a big international incident. It's something that international organizations seem to make a very big deal of, except when Russia does it. And this isn't unique to Ukraine either. We remember in Syria, where Russian involvement resulted in the use of chemical weapons and many other war atrocities. I mean, I guess there was sort of a bit of vagueness in that people were blaming it on Assad, but he's always been a Russian puppet. And we know who actually had the weapons that were used in Syria. So it has always seemed some issue with the way our international organizations work, that Russia, for whatever reason, gets a pass on these horrific war crimes. And if there's no consequences to that, then these rules of law, the statutes of the Geneva Convention, if they aren't enforced, then they don't exist. And I'd rather not live in a world where war crimes are the norm.
And what are the most awful atrocities you've seen that Russians have done?
Oh, well, we're carrying gas masks now, which is something, that I would have hoped would have been relics of an age past. But there have been multiple reports of sarin gas attacks and tear gas attacks against infantry and even second-line troops in multiple locations on the battlefield. Again, we have a mitigation for it, but that's certainly the one that's hit closest to home. And I mean, even just driving through any of these areas around here, we can see the civilian houses that have been hit by artillery fire, by rockets, and gliding bombs. They don't seem to distinguish between civilian and military targets.
How should Russia finish? How should this war be stopped? The end of this war, what is it like?
So, at this point, I only really see two paths to victory for Ukraine. One is if Putin dies, that would be great. Like if anybody were to assassinate him, they would be doing the world a favor. And he is getting old, so it might just happen, but we can't count on that. So at least from a military perspective, I think the only way that we can ensure Ukrainian victory is to facilitate the collapse of the Russian economy, because that's what's funding the war machine. And since a lot of Western, European, and especially Asian nations have refused to sanction Russian oil and gas exports, I think it's a very good thing that the Ukrainian intelligence service is implementing their own sanctions in the form of these refinery attacks. It's probably some of the most effective operations that Ukraine has done in this war.
What do you think? How should other countries, Asian countries, US, European countries, should support maybe more Ukraine? In which way? How? Or maybe it's enough?
I think more direct involvement by other democracies is important to not only ensuring that Ukraine wins this war, but also in demonstrating that there is a strong alliance of the democratic countries of the world. And that sends an important message, because Russia's not the only one. We know China is already making plans to invade Taiwan, and we've already seen Iran has been starting a proxy war that could very well elevate into a large-scale war in the Middle East. And so the precursors to the next World War have started. Like nobody thought that the Nazi invasion of Czechoslovakia would lead to World War II, or the Sino-Japanese War would lead to World War II. But again, these unconnected events, if left unchecked, can escalate to involve the entire world. So I do think that Western countries need a more direct involvement. But as far as what Asian countries can do, I mean, we know China is effectively an ally of Russia. So it's maybe not surprising that they're helping fund their war machine. The most Western countries can do in response to that is to implement sanctions on these countries, because the trade with them is what allows them to fund this war.
Boston, can we say that protecting Ukraine, fighting against Russian invasion, you, Ukrainians, friends of Ukraine, try to stop this next world war? Is it correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's something that I've been trying to explain to people back home. Like, again, my friends and family, anyone I talk to has probably heard this rant from me a million times. But it's something that I think more Americans need to hear. Is that this war does involve us. Like, you know, I have this picture. There's this picture from, I believe it was in the mid-1930s, where you had protesters in New York City advocating for peace with Hitler. Now, back then, people believed that wars in Europe wouldn't affect America, that the war could never come to their shores. But history has taught us a lesson that it did, and it will again if these things are left unchecked. And that's why this already is America's fight. This already is Europe's fight. This already is NATO's fight. It's just a question of rather we want to wait until this escalates further, or rather we want to stop it here in Ukraine. If the Allies had stopped the Nazis in Poland, there never would have been a World War II. And if we stop the Russians in Ukraine, there won't be a World War III.
Great words, really great words. What keeps your spirit, your hope of Ukrainian victory? What helps you from day to day?
So, I think it was about 3 months back, right around the time we had moved to this theater, we had a donation. It was from a fundraiser done by a school in Odessa. And to raise money to buy drones, the kids of this school had made artwork. They had drawn pictures, and they sent them to us with the drones. And we have them hung on the wall of our safe house now. It's one of those things where whenever things feel hopeless, I like to be able to look at those pictures to remind me what I'm fighting for. Because I have so much hope, especially for the younger generation of Ukrainians, that they can build Ukraine into a really good country, one that isn't haunted by the ghost of the Soviet Union, but becomes something that is not only culturally unique, it honors Ukraine's past and Ukraine's Cossack history, but also one that is very much part of the free world.
You know, I'm listening to you and I can't even imagine that you, a person from USA, country that is far away from Ukraine, you realize and you believe and you do a lot for Ukrainian children, for their future. And our neighbor is doing a genocide. Russia kills Ukrainian children. Russia leaves our children without parents.
They bombed a children's cancer hospital. I still can't even wrap my head around that. Like it's one of those things where like you'd expect to see this in like a comic book or something. Like it's just like evil for the sake of evil. It almost defies belief, and yet we have the evidence right there.
It's really unbelievable, and I don't understand why people in Russia still believe, Putin still think that, no, it's not genocide, it's okay. Why?
I will say I got some immense satisfaction seeing some of the videos posted from Russian refugees from Kurds who were petitioning Putin for like, oh, we supported your special military operation. Why is this happening to us? How could the war have come back to our homes?
What's up? My God. Yes.
So I think it's important not only for Westerners to understand, but also for people in Russia to understand that what a war is, and why this special military operation is going to affect Russia as much as it's going to affect Ukraine.
You know, but when Ukrainian army entered Russia, there was no genocide because they entered and they don't kill people, ordinary, usual people, yes, peaceful people. So I think that, I understand you, but I think that
no, you're right.
Russia still, Russian people still haven't realized what their people, what their Russian soldiers had done here in Ukraine.
That's true. That is absolutely true. And I know it seems to me that like for a long history, Russia has always kind of had authoritarian rule. And I think the people of Russia have just become so accustomed to not having a say in these things that they just blindly accept it, no matter what happens to them. And I don't know if there's anything we can necessarily do for the people of Russia. It seems like most of the people that could change Russia have already either fled the country or ended up in jail. And right now, Putin's stranglehold on power in that country is so tight that I can't see Russia changing for the better anytime soon. So in my mind, Russia itself, as far as improving Russia itself, it is kind of a lost cause. So to me, it's more important to focus on protecting the places that would suffer under this authoritarian regime.
You protect peaceful people, you protect kids. I know that you protect also animals. Do you have cats, dogs? Tell us about it.
Well, it's when we're on the field. There's a lot of strays in areas where people had to evacuate quickly, and a lot of people end up leaving behind their pets. And so oftentimes when we're out in position, especially if we're in a settlement or similar area, we'll often have like stray cats visiting us, stray dogs occasionally too. In fact, we were kind of laughing about one of the ironies is that when we pack our personal supplies, we're often packing more cat and dog food than we are people food. And so we try to take care of the strays as best we can, and we have adopted a cat from the front lines as well.
And you take care about them, so you have friends.
I mean, how can you not? Can you not when like these abandoned animals like come to you while you're doing your missions, and like it is a distraction. We have to focus on the mission, but still, we try to make sure they at least have food and water, and it is nice to have company. It is nice to have company on the front.
Face of Ukrainian American soldier who tells about cats. Here it is.
I mean, well, you talked to my NCO.
That's absolutely.
He's even more of an animal lover than I am.
And by the way, did you have animals in US who left there? Do you communicate with your relatives? And just speaking about your life there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any pets myself, but a lot of friends and family do, and you know, it is one of the things me and my wife have been talking about for when we get a house. We had to postpone those plans a little. At this point, I'm in it for the long haul, but my wife has kind of come on board with that, and she'll be joining me here next year. So.
I see. By the way, about your wife, how long are you together? How you communicate now because she's there, you're here? How is it?
We talk every day. Tried sending letters, but
letters? You mean writing letter? Yeah.
Yeah. It was supposed to be one of those things that was romantic and like classy, but they never make it past Poland for some reason. I had a lot of issues with the written letters, so. We mostly have to deal with modern communication apps and phone calls.
She supports you.
She does. I'll be honest, she didn't want me to come here, but she also understood why it was important for me. And she's been nothing but supportive. I'm very grateful for that.
She is a strong woman, and she really loves you if she understood you and if she is still with you. I know it's really... it's like a huge danger for your life. It's a huge danger for her life because she can lose you every moment. She realizes it, and it really scares her.
Yeah, I think you're giving voice to a lot of the things that worry her every day, which is why I make sure I always let her know where I am, when I'm going on mission, and when I'm back safely.
Does she inspire you just to keep on, go on?
I mean,
it's like kind of...
It's important to have somebody who you know is there for you, who you know will support you no matter what. And like I said, I'm very grateful to have someone like that in my life.
What's going to be after the victory, after the Ukrainian victory?
Oh, we go back home and we start a family. I got to be honest, if we already had kids, I probably wouldn't have been able to come here. It's one thing... It's one thing to ask my wife to wait for me, worry about me, but if there are kids that depend on me, I don't think I would have been able to come here. But the way it worked out with when I finally heard back from the Legion, we were able to change our plans a little bit to ensure that I could come here and join the fight.
And after the victory, you'll have kids. You'll be together with your family. Will you visit all together Ukraine?
I mean, we're still trying to figure out whether we want to live in America or Ukraine. I mean, I'll be honest.
Countries?
Well, here's the thing. Depending on how things go politically back in the States, Ukraine might end up being the safer place in the future. We'll see. But I don't want to get into American politics. Things are divided enough as they are right now. And honestly, I think when it comes to politics in America, I think more Americans need to realize that our side is democracy, not Republican or Democrat.
And my last question, maybe I'll ask you just to do one thing, just to look at this camera and say to all the Americans, your thoughts, your wish, your advice in this situation, in this, how to understand, how to behave, how to realize all this situation with Russian aggression, with protection of Ukraine?
I think the best way that I can say it is, as I have said before, there are new access powers of autocracy. China, Iran, and Russia are not just a threat to Ukraine, Taiwan, and Israel. They're a threat to the entire free world. And if democracies of this world choose not to join together and to allow the authoritarian countries who are willing to cooperate to take what they want, then eventually this war will come to our shores. So this is already our fight. And the idea that America can exist isolated from the rest of the world is a fantasy that history has already told us can never be real. And I would encourage everyone from my home and all of America to learn from the lessons of history and understand that this is already our fight.
Thank you. Thank you for these words, for this interview, and for fighting for Ukraine. Thanks a lot.
And thank you for taking the time to talk to me. It's good to be heard.
Thank you. So it was UATV English. Brave hearts. See you.